G'day guys. So I never thought this day would come, but I'm actually gonna rip off this LED light bar here and go old school. Halogen technology. Now you may have heard of this brand before. They're called Fyrlyt. There's a fair bit of controversy on the internet surrounding them. They make a lot of bold claims on their website, so I'm very curious to see how they go, because a lot of people reckon they're the best lights ever. Other people say they're not worth the money. So I'm gonna find out for myself. I've wanted to try these for ages now, so I'm gonna run these for a couple of months and get back to you guys with what I think of them. Right, let's get this LED light bar off. Let's see if they actually fit in there. Oh, beautiful, look at that. Awesome, well I'll see you guys in a couple of months. Let's see how these lights go. Just a little bit of an update on the Fyrlyts. So on the first night drive that I took them on, it was about a 2-hour night drive that we did. Pulled up a camp and a friend of mine, Joel, came around and he's like, hey, your new lights have cracked. And I'm kind of going like, what do you mean they've cracked? And sure enough, walk around the front of the car and yeah, they've cracked alright. I didn't hit anything that night and I wasn't even following a car on gravel road, so it definitely wasn't that. Apparently these lenses, because of the plastic, they just crack up. It's a design flaw with them. Now you may be thinking that's pretty rough, but admittedly I did buy these lights second hand off Gumtree, and when I got them they were in perfect condition, but they do have the older style plastic lenses. So I got in touch with Fyrlyt and kind of asked them like, what's the deal, what's going on with these lights? And pretty much they've released new lenses. These are borosilicate glass and apparently they're a lot more resistant to thermal shock. So these will not crack, I was assured. So I'm gonna chuck these on. They're gonna look a heck of a lot better than these things do, and they'll be Mickey Mouse all over again. So they do recommend a little bit of rubber grease just around where the O-ring sits. Just means it's obviously gonna come off a lot easier if you ever need to get it off again. What a piece of cake. Well, that was so easy to fix, and I've got to say that is one thing that I really like about these lights, is all of the parts are available separately. So if you break anything on the light, you can pretty much order that part and replace it, and it is so easy as well to take the bulb out of the back if that needs to be replaced. I'll just show you guys a quick shot of how easy it is to take the bulb out the back. But yeah, I'm going to run these lights for a couple more months and then I'll get back to you guys with a full review. Well, it's just about time to do a review on the Fyrlyts. But I want to let you guys know what happened today. This morning I was in Francis Pera National Park doing some rough tracks, but not too rough. And first thing that happened was I just flicked my lights on because obviously it's gotten dark. And this one was angled all the way down. And the reason for that is no matter how tight you do the bolt up that holds it, it still moves. It's quite frustrating. And the second thing that happened, I'm just gonna wait for this truck to pass by. Is that the lens actually fell out of this light here. So I'm a little bit bummed about that. Obviously they don't hold in as well as you'd hope. And maybe you shouldn't put rubber grease on them when you're putting the lenses in, because maybe that actually helps it come out. So yeah, that's a little bit annoying, eh? Anyway, let's hit the road. Alright guys, well I think it's time to do the big review of the Fyrlyts. I've almost had them for a year now. So after I got back from that trip up north, I called up Fyrlyt. Now I didn't mention that I have a YouTube channel or that I'm doing a review on them or anything like that. I just called up to order a new lens for the light that lost one. And I was talking to a bloke called Paul, who I think's either the manager or the owner. Pretty sure he's one of the two. And he actually asked what happened to the old lens. And I was like, oh, I was just doing a sand track. It was a little bit corrugated and it just disappeared. It vanished. Wasn't there at the end of the day. And he said, oh, that'll be a warranty claim then. And I was like, well, if you want to call it that, I'm not going to argue. So he sent me out a couple of new lenses, so that was actually pretty good customer service from Fyrlyt, which I was pretty happy about. So let's get into the pros, the cons. What do I think of these lights, and would I buy them again? Well, the best thing about these lights is the color. Like, they're so nice and warm, and I really feel like if you're doing long country drives, you don't fatigue half as quickly. Like, your eyes just last that much longer because the light's so much warmer. And the time when I really noticed this is when I was driving along at night and a four-wheel drive overtook me. So I dipped my lights, he turned on like all of his LED light bars, and it was like far out. Like, when your eyes are adjusted to such a nice warm light, to have this really pure white LED is just like far out. So I feel like if you're doing long night drives, these are awesome. If you're someone who just does short night drives, probably not really worth it. Cheap light bar will do the job, but if you really want to be able to do long night drives and just be in comfort and not fatigue, these are the way to go, because I really feel like you can drive that much longer with these. I mean, you still get tired, it's nighttime, but it's so much better. Now, when you go on the Fyrlyt website, they talk about CRI. Now, if you've never heard about CRI, I don't really blame you, because I never had either. And that's why I was so curious to see how these would go. Now, you're never going to hear an LED light bar manufacturer talking about CRI. The reason for that is because it stands for Color Rendering Index. And when you look at the CRI of an LED light, it's not that great. I mean, you get really good blues, really good greens, but when you look at the red and the browns and the wavelengths, it's just not really that crash hot. Compare it to a halogen light. You get really good greens and really good reds and dark browns, all that kind of thing. And when you think about wildlife at night, usually they're dark colored. I mean, kangaroos, they're brown, wombats are pretty dark as well. So the better the CRI, the better chances you have of seeing an animal if it jumps out onto the road or it's on the side of the road. So I actually reckon there's something to what Fyrlyt claim. I reckon they are onto something. And I reckon I might not ever go back to LED lights again. Now, that being said, I still reckon that LED lights have their place by all means. I mean, you cannot beat the spread of an LED light. For instance, I've actually got these two little LED pod lights here. And the reason for that is because now everyone's a bit different here. Everyone likes different things. Every one of my mates has different driving setup for nighttime, like completely different. I just find that there's not quite enough spread on the sides. I like to be able to see a little bit more of the sides. So I've just got these little pod lights here. They've just got a yellow cover on them, so they kind of match in with the Fyrlyts a bit better. And I just find it's my perfect long distance night driving setup. But if you're doing rock crawling at night, or tight tracks, or even for reverse lights, you cannot beat an LED light. There's no denying that. So I'm not saying they're the bee's knees, but as far as long distance country night driving goes, I reckon they're awesome. So let's really talk about the other pros and the other cons. Just before we get into the pros and cons, let me show you guys a side-by-side comparison of the Fyrlyts and your standard LED light bar. So this is the Fyrlyts with the headlights covered, so there's no other additional lights, just the Fyrlyts by themselves. Now let's flick over to an LED light bar. Now that's a pretty massive change in color, so you can probably see what I mean about the color temperature. I really feel like this halogen color right here, when you compare it to this, is just so much warmer and just so much easier on the eyes. Now just let me show you guys what I mean with my little pod lights. So this is just the Fyrlyts by themselves, and this is the Fyrlyts with the pod lights on. So you can just see it just lights up the sides a little bit more, which is personally what I prefer, but everyone's different. So the pros of the Fyrlyts. Well, as we've discussed, the color temperature and the CRI, much better for sighting wildlife when you're driving at night. The other cool things about them is that everything can be replaced, and it's so easy to do. I already showed you guys earlier in the video how to take the bulb out, how to change the lenses, and if you do happen to break anything on these lights, you can just order it, replace it yourself. It's super easy. So what about the cons? Well, I've already mentioned a couple of the cons in the video. I think one con that you don't really think about when you're buying driving lights is I've never actually had halogen before these. So these were my first set of halogen lights. And for me, it was a bit of a shock how long it actually took me. It took me about 3 or 4 different kind of adjustments to finally get the setting that I like. Because they're quite pinpoint, you really have to get them facing where you want. Well, with an LED light bar, as long as it's facing the general direction, you're gonna get the light that you want. So that's kind of one con of the Fyrlyts. You really gotta hone them into where you want them to be. And as far as the spot and the spread, there's like, well, I don't know. It's so easy to change. I mean, I can just do it right now for you guys. All you gotta do is push that in and then twist it. But you only get about, I don't know, I'd say 10 or 20% wider beam thanks to the change. It's not really that much at all. So, I mean, it changes a little bit, but it's not really that noticeable at all. Now, another con, I think I already mentioned it, is that the lights actually move up and down quite easily. So I often find that if I've been working in the engine bay of the car, I quite often knock them. Or if I'm going through bushes, trees, all that kind of stuff, the bushes and the trees tend to rearrange them for me as well. So it's a little bit frustrating. You know, it starts getting dark, you're on the road, you flick them on, and one's facing the trees and the other one's down on the road, stuff like that. It does get a little bit annoying. No matter how tight you do the little Allen key bolt, they'll just move. Now, in some ways it's a good design feature because if they get knocked, they're not going to break. I mean, if they were rigid, they would probably break something. So it depends how you look at it, but I've never had them move on corrugations. Usually it's something physically pushing it that changes the angle of the light. Now, being a halogen, it's not like an LED. LEDs last for thousands and thousands of hours. Halogens don't last as long. So you could actually carry spare halogens if you wanted to, but so far, after having them for a year, I've had no issues with the bulb whatsoever. But one issue I have had as far as the light goes is this. See that? The plug on the back, it's really not the best design. So on the back of the light, there's 2 little terminals that stick out, and the plug actually slips over those 2 terminals. But it's not really the best connection. Like, you just see like a little bit of movement and the light turns off and on. So I've actually turned the lights on one night and nothing happened, and I was like, what's going on here? Anyway, when I got home later and figured it all out, I was like, got my multimeter, there was power coming to the end of the cord, and I was like, what's going on here? Plugged them back in and they work. So they're a little bit fidgety when it comes to that. So that's something that really could be improved, because yeah, it's just not the best, hey? You do have to remember that I picked up these lights secondhand, so maybe they have improved the design a little bit. Maybe the plugs are better designed now. I don't really know. But the big question, would I buy them again after owning them? You know what? They have their issues, but I would still buy them again. In fact, I think I'd go for the 250 watt version next time. Just that extra little bit of light while still having that warmth and that really nice color, I reckon would just be the bee's knees. I mean, sure, they have their issues, but I just can't get over how nice that color is on your eyes. So there you go, guys. Make up your own mind. This is just my personal preference on lights. If you love your LED light bars, that's great. But for the amount of night driving that I do, I reckon these are the way to go. Now, some people would say they're quite expensive, but I'm a big believer in you get what you pay for. And when you look at LED lights, some of them are up around the $2,000 mark for a really good quality light. So they're not actually that expensive if you compare it to that. But if you're on a budget, they probably are out of your budget range. Anyway, guys, make up your own mind. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to get out there and seek adventure!